welcome back to what I'm calling a 10-minute video, although quite often they're more like 15-minute videos. But the whole point is it's just a quick design that you can possibly make at home. And today I'm doing a design in the same containers that I've done an arrangement in before, so that you can really see that containers can be quite versatile and that you don't have to buy a different container every time you do a different style of arranging. So this time I'm going to use just ordinary water. There is no wire netting, no chicken wire as we tend to refer to it as, and there's no floral foam. So it's just your plain empty container. Not everybody can get hold of floral foam. Not everybody knows how to use it. It's not biodegradable, so often people are reluctant to use it. And again, chicken wire sometimes isn't easily accessible for everybody. It's not something that you sort of put on your shopping list when you're out on the weekends. So I thought we would just look at how you could arrange flowers by just resting them onto the container. Now, one thing you have to consider with this type of style of arrangement is to have something that's quite deep, so that there is enough depth in the container for you to store and hold your flowers. And to start with, I'm using just the hydrangea that is currently grown in my garden, and it fascinates me how the hydrangea is so varied in its colour combination when it comes from the same bush. And you can see that with this one that is more green in its colouring, it's because this bigger flower has been sitting on top of it, and it's been protecting it from the wind and the rain and the sun, and therefore the petals, or the bracts as they are really called, don't change when the weather and the sun gets on them. And you can see that the green of the end is the underside, so that's the part that doesn't get the light. Now, hydrangea is actually a bract, and the flower is this very, very small, you can't see it now, but it would be a very small, insignificant part in the centre here. It's almost like a little dot. This is actually a bract, or a modified leaf, and some people struggle with keeping hydrangeas hydrated at home. And if you find that they're looking a little bit sad, you can dunk the whole head of the hydrangea in a bucket of water, and it can take up water through the bracts or the modified leaf there at the top. Very, very versatile. It's currently October, it's the middle of October. A great time to pick them if you want to dry them. And if you dry them when they're in a good condition like this, you pick them on a dry day, you can just sit them in a vase with a very small amount of water in the bottom or in a bucket, and they will naturally dry on their own in the house. So one to bring in for a little bit of colour during the winter. So what I'm going to do with these is I'm just really going to sit them on the edge of the container and cutting them quite short, remembering to remove any foliage that's below the water level. And I'm placing them in whatever the position they want to sit. So I'm not forcing them into a different shape or trying to create an outline shape like a triangle or a circle or something. I'm just cutting them fairly short and keeping them low down in the container. And they'll almost act as a framework to hold all the other flowers into place. And I've got 3. There's no reason for me having 3. It's just that they were the 3 nicest ones I could find when I was selecting them. And I've placed them almost in a triangle sort of shape if you look at it from down the top. Now if I just tip it forward, you can almost see. What I'm trying not to do is to create a very symmetrical pattern. So in nature, flowers are very rarely grown symmetrically. The outline of this bush might look the same, but the flowers on either side are very different in their shape and size. So we're not trying to force that into any shape that it doesn't want to be. Now I got quite excited at the supermarket this morning because these big-headed roses were in the reduced section, and I thought, no smell to them, which is a bit of a shame, but I thought that they would be a nice big rose to place in with these hydrangeas. Obviously the hydrangea is very large, so it's good to have a companion flower that's also big to go along with them. So the scale of your flowers alongside one another is very similar, and the overall design will be far more pleasing to the eye. So I've removed some of the outer petals of the roses because they're looking a little bit damaged, which is quite normal for roses. The guard petals on the outside can sometimes be a little bit sad. Sometimes it gives the rose quite a nice bit of character when you have a little bit of maybe the green colouring on the outside. But for these, which I sort of salvaged from the reduced section, would benefit from having those petals removed. Now it's an all-round design, so somebody will see it from the front and from the back, so I need to work on both sides of the arrangement, making sure that there's something of interest on both sides for people to look at. And if the rose or the flower that you're using doesn't want to sit in the place that you'd like it to go, you can use the hydrangea as almost a little bit of a support for the head, and it will keep it in the position that you want it to go. So the hydrangea sometimes acts a little bit like your wire mesh would be if you were using that as your mechanic. So most of the flowers that I've put in so far have been cut fairly similar in length. I had a couple of the roses that were a little broken in the packaging, so they'll have to go a little bit lower down in my arrangement, but that doesn't matter. It gives me a nice little bit of interest. And you can see with that one, even though there isn't anything wrong with the outer petals, they are very green in their colouring, so it can be a little bit distracting sometimes to the overall flower. And again, I'm just going to use a little bit of the hydrangea head just to support it and keep it into place. Remembering that even if the stems are short, they have to be able to reach the water source. So you can either fill your container up a little bit higher, or obviously not use anything that's too short stemmed, otherwise it's just not going to last for you in the arrangement. Now again, I'm not looking for it to be symmetrical, I'm not looking for it to be balanced on either side. It's just a pleasing display of everyday flowers that you might be able to get hold of in your local florist or your local supermarket. And this one is the little alstroemeria. Now, I teach lots of classes, and an alstroemeria is a beautiful flower. It's a very attractive, dainty flower, but it's very, very hard to arrange unless you're using the full stem. If you think you're going to be able to take the little heads off and insert them into foam, I suggest you give up. But they are much better used on that full, nice, strong stem. And we're just a little bit taller, so it's almost arranging in layers. So with the alstroemeria, I've gone slightly higher than the rose and the hydrangea. And again, as I come to the front, I'm going to use that hydrangea there as a little bit of a support to hold my flower into place. Okay, so it's that quite whimsical is the word that I often use. It's a design that doesn't really have a formal shape or a formal pattern. It's just something that you can put together quite simply without thinking too much about rules of flower arranging. It's something that maybe you could do with the children. And what you're aiming to do is just not to cover and hide the flowers that are underneath. Just create these very interesting layers. And my poor little rose, I think we'll have to give up on him because he's a little bit too short and he's not quite reaching the water source. So we'll take him out. And I have some white carnations. Now that one will be able to pop in where I originally had the rose. And it's this style of arranging is really quite good for clustering your materials together. Makes a big impact with the flower choices. Now it's a style of arrangement that you would tend to look down on rather than look across at like you're doing with the camera. So you might be thinking that I've lost quite a lot of the hydrangeas, but when it's on a coffee table and you're looking down on it, you can still see all the lovely colour and the texture of the hydrangeas there underneath. So we've got really pretty little design taking place. I've got one short little carnation which we can bring in towards the back, so we bring a little bit of that white colour in through to the back of the design as well. And I have one of my favourites, this lovely freesia. And what we don't want to do with the freesia obviously is hide it in amongst all the flowers so that you can't see the freesia. It's a very small, delicate flower. So I'm going to raise this up a little bit, so it's a little bit raised and a little bit proud of the flowers. They smell wonderful. You don't want to hide them. It's such a pretty flower. Now this is a good design to do with maybe a mixed bunch of flowers, or if you've possibly had flowers delivered to you and you're not quite sure how to arrange them and how they would sit in a container or what size vase to put them in. This is quite a nice style to do. Just start with layers and build up layers as you go along till you've got overall sort of pleasing shape really. Now I haven't incorporated any foliage in that at all because I know when you're arranging from home, sometimes it's hard to be able to get a decent selection of foliage. But that just shows what you can do with a very minimal amount of flowers, no foliage at all, and just an oval ceramic container that will hold a fairly decent amount of water. So what do we think of that one? I hope you're enjoying. Now don't forget, if you're enjoying the videos, whether it's these short 10-15 minute videos or whether it's the back to basics videos that we release on a Monday morning, please subscribe to the channel or give us a thumbs up, and if you want to write a comment, I'd be interested to know how you're enjoying the videos. And thank you and bye for now.